This is the devotional for Sunday, September the 12th. The title, False Accusations, the Hook of Humiliation. Now, the scripture reading is 2 Samuel chapter 10 and 1 Chronicles 19. Now, these are parallel passages, meaning they are a record of the same historical event. And so my focus will be 2 Samuel 10, which is also paralleled in 1 Chronicles 19. But for today's study, 2 Samuel 10. Now, 2 Samuel 10, verse 1 begins with the phrase, "And it came to pass." Well, that begs a recap of the things that led up. What were the things that preceded "and it came to pass"? Well, you might remember how David had sought in chapter 9 of 2 Samuel a survivor of King Saul's lineage. Well, when he learned that Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the grandson of Saul, was still alive, David summoned Mephibosheth to appear before him. Well, fulfilling his covenant to be a blessing to Jonathan's lineage, David extended a gracious invitation to Mephibosheth and invited him, and I quote, to eat continually at the king's table with his own sons. Mephibosheth, though lame, was privileged to once again live as a prince. And it came to pass. That brings us to 2 Samuel 10, verse 1 through 5, where we see, first of all, an act of humiliation and disgrace. What came to pass? Well, David had received news that Nahash, the king of the children of Ammon, had died, and his son reigned in his stead. Well, David remembered a past kindness shown to him by Nahash, and felt it behooved him to send ambassadors to extend sympathy and condolences to Hanun, Nahash's son, and his heir. Well, those ambassadors coming into the land of the children of Ammon were met by Ammonite counselors who were convinced Hanun that David had sent him not ambassadors but spies to discover the nation's weaknesses. Well, Hanun trusted his own counselors, and he failed to examine the Israelite men himself, and he betrayed David's trust, humiliated the Israelite men, shaving off half of their beard and cutting off their robes. Well, for David, that was a provocation of war. You see, an ambassador is an agent of a ruler and his government. And David took the ill treatment of his ambassadors as a personal offense. 2 Samuel 10 and verse 5. When the Ammonites learned that David was incensed by their ill treatment of his men, they hired Syrian mercenaries to prepare to war against Israel. Learning the Ammonites had hired Syrian warriors, David commanded Joab to gather the, quote, host of the mighty men of Israel and go to war against the Ammonites and their Syrian mercenaries. Well, confident the Lord was with Israel, Joab and Abishai, his brother, went to war against the Ammonites and the Syrians. When the Syrian mercenaries fled from before Joab, the Ammonites soon also fled into the safety of their walled city. But for Syria, the war did not end there. You'll notice in verse 15 through 19 of 2 Samuel 10, although they had been defeated in the initial skirmish with Israel, the Syrians gathered an even greater army against Israel. Well, this time David, the king himself, led Israel to battle and soundly defeated Syria. There were 700 men who were driving chariots who died, and 40,000 horsemen, and even Shobach, the captain of the Syrian army. Israel's success against Syria moved the kings of other nations to make peace with Israel and come under tribute to David. Now, closing thoughts. What can we learn or take away from today's study? I think the most prominent lesson is the need to search out a matter. Seek the truth first before charging someone, like a David, with wrong motives or wrongdoing. You see, David's desire had been to extend sympathy and comfort to the Ammonites upon the death of their king Nahash. And tragically, the Ammonite counselors accused David of sending men to spy out the land. And that accusation, along with Hanun's ill treatment of David's men, led to war and the deaths of thousands of soldiers. How tragic! King Hanun believed a lie. and his nation and families grieve the deaths of their son. Don't believe everything you hear, especially about others. Take time to investigate. Get the truth. Make an effort to know the heart and intent of a man before you believe the worst. That's my challenge for today. God bless you. Have a great day, and bye-bye.